So I think this is sort of the kind of insight I'm kind of taking from psychology, is that our emotions, we tend to think of them as very distinct categories, but that's probably not the case. There's a really interesting book, and I'm going to forget the author right now, but she was talking about how basically we have this idea that we have these very discrete emotions like fear and all this kind of stuff.
Mm.
Whereas if you actually look sort of in not only people's facial expressions, but fMRI studies, as sort of the brain's signature, so to speak, of emotions, or even like neural systems in the brain, it's not really clear that we have these well-defined subsystems for, that anxiety is really that much different from depression, or that fear is that much different from anger, or these kinds of things, even though we kind of feel, oh no, those are totally different. And so it seems to be that they're probably at some level of interpretation. So it's not that there's something physically different about your body when you are feeling one thing versus another. And so the idea here is that when we are feeling both excited and afraid, they both involve kind of a general level of arousal. And the only difference that seems to be between excitement and fear is sort of the valence of it, whether it's something that, so fear means that you're aroused or you're kind of excited, but something bad you think is going to happen. And excitement is when you think something good is going to happen. And so those are those two things. And what I kind of wanted to make in that point is that these emotions are much closer together than they sort of naively feel. And I think if we reflect on our experiences, we have that. If you've ever done anything kind of thrill seeking a little bit, like I went skydiving a year or two ago, and that's the perfect example of a mixture of fear and excitement, that you're afraid, and then the fear kind of gets your heart rate going, and then you're also a bit excited, and then you kind of goes back and forth between those. And what I think the problem, and I think that the thing that we're trying to avoid in setting goals, and this is related to sort of this idea I was talking about with effort in the first place, because to summon up effort, to actually do things, you kind of need that arousal, and not just in sort of a momentary sense, but in a kind of, you need to be present, you need to be alert, you need to be taking this seriously, if that was sort of a phrase that you could describe to yourself. And because of this, you kind of need to have that tension a little bit. It's not possible to just, oh yeah, that'll just get done regardless, is not going to create any tension. And so I think it sometimes is a useful exercise to consider a goal that does scare you a little bit. Now, it doesn't have to scare you in the sense of like, well, that's impossible for me to do that. Obviously, goals that are impossible don't actually scare you, because you know you won't do them, right? It has to be something that has this feeling of, maybe I could do that, right? And what would that mean if I would do that? And what would I have to do in order to do that? And so I think in the projects that I've undertaken, they've always been sort of designed with that idea in mind, that there's something that is plausible enough that I could do, that I'm engaged with them, but they are kind of at this edge of my ability, so that I know I'm going to have to take them seriously in order for them to actually happen. And so I think when we're taking on projects, there's the two sort of opposite tendencies. The one that kind of like the pie in the sky, where you don't resonate with it because you're not going to do that. This is just daydreaming, right? I'm going to be a billionaire, right? This is, okay, sure, I can write that on a piece of paper, but it doesn't feel anything for me, because, all right, well, but what is that going to change about my behavior? But if you were going to say to yourself, I'm going to save 50% of my income, right? Now you're kind of, okay, well, how would I do that? Now you're kind of, so maybe in this financial domain, that kind of scares you a little bit, because you know that it would be very difficult to do this, but you'd have to be serious about it. And so I think for learning, getting those projects that when you write them down, you feel this mixture of fear, of excitement, and you're not quite sure which is which yet, I think is often a good sign, because it shows that it's something that has a lot of, it's significant to you. There's some research as well showing that, like, one of the things that we seem to detect is not even so much that something is necessarily good or bad, primarily, but also that this is significant, that this is something to be paid attention to, that this is something that you need to devote your resources toward. So I think the more you can design your goals in such a way that they activate these emotional subsystems, so that they feel significant, they feel like you have some tension, so having that right feeling, I think, is really important. And I think just making a goal where you don't really feel much at all is probably going to be the kind of thing that you don't even remember to do it 2 weeks later, right?
Yeah.